Hi everyone, it's Az here from HeelvsBabyface. To hit the cliche, I'm afraid, but it's true. 2020 has been a roller coaster in terms of video games. Some of the stuff we might have thought was going to be really good didn't necessarily pan out that way. Give a couple of examples. Resident Evil 3 wasn't a patch, I don't think, on the Resident Evil 2 remake, which came out the previous year. The Last of Us Part 2, proving to be exceedingly divisive. The critics loved it, and players, for the most part, seem to hate it. And I can easily see why. It's going to be featured heavily in this video. But there have been some games which have come through which you might have been slightly concerned about. Final Fantasy VII Remake is a perfect example of that. I absolutely adored it. I could separate the fact that it was a complete remake from the ground up on the original version, so I was expecting some changes, obviously, in the story, which they did play with. But I thought the look of it was sensational. The combat was incredible, but more importantly, the story and the characters were just perfect, if you ask me. The level of depth and detail and characterization which they brought just put an extra layer on top of what we'd known in this 23-year-old game, this 23-year-old franchise. And particularly when you look at Jesse and Biggs and Wedge and how they really flesh those characters out. And then, of course, Tifa and her relationship with you, Aerith and her relationship with you, Barrett, etc., etc. Even Johnny, for goodness sake. And so, to me, it was a complete home run. I adored every single solitary bit of it. I wanted more immediately, but I'm going to have to wait years for that. And the other game, which is featuring heavily, of course, in today's video, is Ghost of Tsushima. And I was a little bit on the fence about this game. I'd seen some of the footage that they'd released throughout the course of the last year or so. And I thought, it looks okay. I thought it looked more akin to a Soulsborne-esque game. I thought the combat was going to be that sort of level of difficult. Then I thought to myself, do I really want another one of these type of games which can be uber frustrating, especially with Sekiro, Shadows Die Twice. I couldn't get to grips with it. I like the fact that they created a really tough game with a very complex combat system, but for some reason it just didn't click with me, and I couldn't click with the combat, and I really wanted to. I'm sure one day I'll sit down and give it another go. But Ghost of Tsushima came out, and I thought I'd give it a go, and absolutely adored it. And of course, there are games which are still yet to release because they've been pushed back, a la Cyberpunk 2077. But what was really interesting is the media have been using Ghost of Tsushima as an excuse. They've been using it as an excuse to bash on it in an effort to try and elevate The Last of Us Part 2. It's pathetic and childish, but this is where we are with current day games media. It's run by activists. It's not run by people that actually truly care about video games. In actual fact, if you look at what a lot of them write about, I think it's evident that they hate video games for the most part. But the narrative with The Last of Us Part 2, from the critics' perspective, of course, was that this was a game that defined a generation. Was it bollocks? It was terrible. It was 10 out of 10, masterpiece, stunning. Oh my god. Naughty Dog, you're amazeballs. Sony, this is fantastic-y. Oh my god, Neil Druckmann, you're just like the bestest ever. And when I played it, and yes, I had my issues with Sony and Naughty Dog because of the DMCA, false DMCA takedowns, which they did with my channel, but that got resolved, and thankfully they drove lots of traffic to my site, and, you know, I got a payday out of it, so thank you. But objectively, just objectively playing the game from a mechanics point of view, it played fine, you know. I don't think it was terrible. I don't think it was wonderful in terms of mechanics. It was fine. It looked gorgeous. There's no denying that whatsoever. It was a beautiful looking game, you know, even in a post-apocalyptic world and everything with a destroyed Seattle. Absolutely amazing in that category. Sound, for the most part, was very good, except when there were certain bits with an enemy and they seemed way too loud for where they were. But other than that, fine. But what failed miserably was the story. The story was dog shit. In my humble opinion, it was terrible. It was really basic and superficial and attempted to manipulate you on a childish level. It tried to manipulate you on a level that you complete and utterly knew that you were being manipulated. And so the manipulation failed miserably. For example, a couple of examples. You, as Ellie, when you start off playing as Ellie for the first part of the game, you're killing these dogs, which are being thrust upon you with no problem whatsoever. When you play as Abby, you go to a kennels and you start playing with these dogs that you kill. Oh, look at the dogs that you killed. Abby's playing with them. They're cute little doggies. No, they were attack dogs that were trained to kill you. Just because you see the niceness of them, the trained element of them from one perspective, doesn't mean from the other perspective that you'd be like, oh, but they are so cute. No, they were trained to kill you. So you'd have no problem doing what you did in the game. Other sort of manipulative elements were the complete flip reverse 180 of the characters at the beginning of the game. Abby and her crew, her posse of people, when they go after Joel and attack Joel and kill Joel, they are aggressive, they're nasty. Even Manny, one of the characters, spits on Joel, calls him a puta or something, calls him an arsehole or a wanker or a tosser, whatever, etc. But when you get onto Abby's story, they're completely different characters. There's no traits from the second part of the story which marry up with the first part of the story. And particularly with Manny as an example, his viciousness towards Joel, for example, and then when he's pinned down with Abby from Tommy, Joel's brother, he's still new Manny. He isn't like this fucking arsehole, I'm gonna fucking rip his head off. He's not like that sort of Manny which he was. No. He's like, oh, we pinned down, we gotta go here, we gotta go there. Type of business. Oh no, he's shooting cars to get enemies to run at us. Ah! It's not the same character. Manny, oh look, I care about my daddy. My daddy, he's a slightly ill. I gotta look after him. Don't give a shit. You're a twat. Because the storytelling in The Last of Us Part 2 is basic. One of the massive elements with the story in The Last of Us Part 2, which fails miserably, is Neil Cuckman never allows anything to breathe. Never allows anything to truly sit. The game starts with the shocking death of Joel. After that, Ellie just goes on an immediate rampage with her brand new, fresh girlfriend, with no character development between them, apart from they smoked pot and scissored each other the night before. Well, the same moment Joel got his head crushed in. And they were now going on an almost suicide mission to Seattle together to try and kill Abby and her posse. Complete disconnects. You start off in Jackson, next minute you're at Seattle. What happened in that journey? We needed to have the character development of Ellie and Dina during that journey. We needed to know why they loved each other, immediately in love with each other, why they fancied each other, what things happened since they got to meet each other for the first time, which brought this about. Because all that we'd heard before that is that Dina was with Jesse, a guy, and then suddenly she was with a girl. Sure, bisexual, no problem, whatever. But what was the motivation? So we know nothing about this couple. Suddenly it's just couple together. No development, no nothing. With Ghost of Tsushima, we are immediately invested in the storyline from almost the beginning. Whereas The Last of Us 2 tried to rely on the shocking death of Joel, Ghost of Tsushima starts off with this invasion of the Mongols onto the island of Tsushima. And their annihilation, the annihilation of the samurai. And you can be forgiven, and I certainly played it out this way, where I thought I was going into this glorious battle, hacking down Mongols when I was on my horse. Then I get blasted off my horse. Then I'm with a group of other samurai and we're going around hacking some more Mongol. But before I know it, we're thinned out and it's just me. Everyone's annihilated. This wasn't glorious battle. This was a rout. And your uncle is taken captive and everyone else is dispatched. You attempt immediately to go to your uncle's estate and save him. And then the Khan's nephew, grandson, nephew, can't remember which one, grandson, I think, maybe. Genghis Khan's grandson, I think it is, comes out. And instead of having a glorious boss fight to start with and releasing your uncle, now it's time to take Tsushima. No. You are absolutely ripped apart by him and knocked off a bridge. And that is where your journey truly begins. You have experienced defeat as part of a nation, and then you have experienced defeat as an individual. You are at your lowest ebb. You've lost everything. Your armor is in tatters, it's in pieces, and you're being nursed back to health by Yuna, a great character which we'll probably touch on later on, ladies. And so you're immediately invested in your character. You're immediately invested in the almost insurmountable journey which lies ahead. You haven't just got to take over your island, you've got to rebuild yourself. You have to rebuild yourself, you have to find your own worth, you have to bring up your own level of skill. You can't do this alone. You need to get allies to help, but allies, of course, are wanting help back. This isn't yes sir, no sir. This is, look, if you want my help, then you got to help me. This is barter and trade. And in doing so, you learn skills, and in doing so, you get invested in their stories. You get invested in Yuna's desperate attempt to save her brother and the guilt that she feels towards being responsible for him and the levels in which she has sunk herself to do so. Whereas you are the noble samurai, Yuna is the thief. She is a polar opposite. And then you suddenly realize that if you're to take your island, you have to sacrifice your own morality to do so. You have to embrace a different way of fighting other than just the samurai. You can embrace the ghost. Everything which goes against the code that your uncle taught you. And so you are at odds with yourself as well as the nation which has been taken over. This is crafted storytelling. And so whether it's a side quest or a main quest, because this isn't just a very quick in-out put the kettle on, they are made up of various parts so you can go off and explore the world and do other things and come back to the quests. These are multi-layered quest lines, but the story that is in each and every one makes you so invested in those characters. In The Last of Us Part 2, who am I invested in? Dina? Don't know anything about her. Ellie? Non-recognizable from the character from the first game. Why am I invested in the Dina and Ellie relationship? Because they're gay? Or because they're in a lesbian relationship? No. Some progressive people will say that's good enough. But no, as somebody who's wanting to be invested in the story and the characters, I need more than that. That's not enough to get me interested. I need to know why. And none of that is ever explained. And then when a moment comes in the game, The Last of Us Part 2, where Ellie and Dina can suddenly sit down and get a little bit of development going while they're in Seattle. Dina sees that Ellie's mask has been damaged and that the spores are not affecting her, although she thinks at first that maybe the spores will affect her and Ellie's going to die. Ellie confesses that she's immune. I'm immune to the spores. I'm immune to bite. This isn't a chemical burn. This was a bite. I got bit 5 years ago. I never turned. I'm immune. And instead of letting that sit, instead of letting that develop into something, into these two characters becoming more open with one another, for maybe Dina to realize that she never knew Ellie, or she didn't really know the true Ellie, or elements like this, she immediately responds by saying, "Hi, I'm pregnant. I'm pregnant." Never letting anything sit. Never letting us actually get invested. And so who was she pregnant by? She was pregnant, of course, by Jesse. I think this is going to be a long video. She was impregnated by Jesse. And as we discover throughout the course of the game and through the medium of flashbacks, Dina and Jesse have been together for years, on and off, for years. And one of the last things that Jesse was very kind to oblige was to impregnate Dina before they split up again. Which would have been fine if we actually got some development with Jesse. But Dina and Ellie go to Seattle on their own, spend the majority of the time on their own, and only when Dina is sort of taken out of the game for a while because of her pregnancy, making Ellie have to be the lone wolf, Jesse turns up for a brief period of the game. Or as I like to call him, sperm donor. They don't do anything characterized with him much. He doesn't have much of a personality at all. He's completely inoffensive. There's nothing to particularly like about Jesse. There's nothing to dislike about Jesse. They're vanilla. A character with no character. Impregnated Dina so that her and Ellie could have a family, and then shot in the head by Abby a little bit later on. Another person brought in to be sacrificed to the anyone can die at any time, which happens so regularly throughout The Last of Us Part 2 that it becomes meaningless. Meaningless. Whether it be Manny getting shot in the head by Tommy, whether it be Owen and Mel being killed by Ellie. Meaningless. Jesse, Boosh, Tommy in the head. Survives, but you kind of wonder how. Got shot to the back of his head to come out of his eye. Whatever. But there was nothing to get invested with Ellie, Dina, or Jesse. Tommy seemed pretty different again from the first game. Briefly appears after, the whole Joel business. Then we see the little bit in the theater. Then he's shot and out the game, and then he just turns up at the farmhouse to say, "We need to get revenge again." The story is so basic. So then we go to the Abby side of things. And the Abby side of things becomes hilarious because that horrible, vicious, disgusting person that we saw at the beginning, that person that wanted to torture Joel to death, didn't just want revenge. She didn't just want revenge for Joel killing her dad. She wanted to punish him. She wanted to torture him and tortured him, repeatedly beating him with a golf club until eventually she caved his head in with it when Ellie came in, smashed in. Then when we get to Abby's side of the story, nothing. No consistency in the character whatsoever. We don't have her thinking constantly about the decision that she made. We don't have her thinking about what she did. We don't have any of her crew questioning her. Even when it's discussed as to why she wanted revenge on Joel, which was because Joel killed her surgeon father, who was pathetically made out to be some Jesus-esque character. Oh, look, I'm just the bestest dad in the world, Z's, ever, Z's. Look, the sun's shining, the birds are singing. It's a beautiful day and there's a zebra. Let's save the zebra that's stuck in the wire. Aren't I an amazing person? Oh my God, Joel killed me. Hilariously bad. And when we discover that, Joel shot him. Just bang, shot him. If she wanted revenge, you would have felt that she would have done the same. An eye for an eye, shot him back. But she tortured him. Where did that come from? Well, we don't know, because when we play her storyline, she's not that character anymore. Suddenly, this character is an altruistic, oh my God, I just meet a couple of people. Oh my Godsies, I leave them to fend for themselves, which is pretty much par for the course. But now in the morning, I had a dream about them, so I'm going to go check on them to make sure they're okay. Because I'm caring and feeling Abby's. And when you make a character so redundantly basic like that, because we see other sides, we see when she's fighting Ellie in the theatre with Dina, that she's quite happy to slit Dina's throat. When she finds out she's pregnant, she relishes it. Because she doesn't care about anyone. When Manny's shot in the head, she's like, oh Christ. Never mentioned again. When she's at the theatre confronting Ellie and saying, you killed my friends. She's just come from an island where she's butchered tons and tons of wolves. Her friends, which she's lived with for years and years. She herself has done so. Terrible, terrible storytelling. And then you get Ghost of Tsushima. A game which, in theory, actually has things going against it. The Last of Us Part 2 is a story-based linear narrative game. Ghost of Tsushima is an open sandbox game. It's an open world game. There are plenty of things to do for you to just explore the map, for you to get involved in taking fishing villages or camps away from the Mongols, to doing platforming elements by finding temples in the mountains and such, by following foxes and paying respects to shrines, to getting butt naked, literally butt naked in hot springs to increase your health, to finding suits of armor, finding glamour, transmog for your character, to upgrading stuff to make it better or look prettier. You have all these elements which are kind of a little bit perceived negatively nowadays because we've had reams and reams of Ubisoft shit. Ubisoft releasing the same game for year over year over year over year. Regardless of what the franchise is, it's the same fucking game again and again and again because Ubisoft don't have any creativity. Whether it be Far Cry or Tom Clancy's middle finger up your bum, it doesn't matter. It's just the same generic open world sandbox third person. And so you fear that that was going to be detrimental to this, but no. Why? Because the characters and the stories are so strong. Even when you deal with little fishing villages, Things seem to all tie together. If you do the main story for one part and jump ahead of doing the individual storylines for other characters, it will marry with it. For example, I won't say which because I don't want to spoil it for some people. One of the characters loses a friend. I could have done that story and that friend would have been alive, but I did another story and the friend died. So when I went back to that other story, they mentioned the fact that their friend had died. And I was just like, wow, that's really clever. Just ties in. Just ties in. Or whether I'm being sent by musicians on journeys to discover new incredible armors or fighting techniques. All these things could distract you, dissuade you. You could get yourself lost, but you don't because the characters are so well driven. Use your ghost abilities too much. You start getting flashbacks to your uncle talking about the honor of the samurai and looking your enemy in the eye when you kill them, as opposed to coming up behind and assassinating them. Just little pieces like that. Add on to the characterization. The small victories which you get and the crushing defeats that you feel along the way, all in an effort to try and retake the island of Tsushima, to reclaim what isn't, well, what again, I won't I won't spoil anything, but to reclaim your land, your homeland, shall we say. And it's very important, and I think this is why the reaction to Ghost of Tsushima has been how it's been to gamers. Because gamers have seen a game which is fun. Fun. Really excellent gameplay. The swordplay in it is immense. The different stances depending on which type of enemy that you're fighting. The archery, the little tricks, the assassinations, the chain assassinations, the riding, the everything. All these elements make for a fun game tied together with beautiful landscapes and incredible stories. Difficult stories at times. Heartbreaking stories at times. But I felt more invested in the characters in Ghost of Tsushima than I did in The Last of Us Part 2, because these characters were allowed to develop. We weren't being taken on a kid manipulation ride that was so basic it took you out of the game. So players loved Ghost of Tsushima. Sold out in Japan. China weren't so happy about it, but they were the enemies in the game, so you know what I mean. Here in the UK, I tried to buy a copy for a friend. Couldn't get it from Amazon. Out. Had to buy it from game.co.uk, and then they still said next day, it's going to have to be a couple of days, 2-3 days, which meant it was probably coming direct from the suppliers because of the low stocks. Not saying it's sold better, because it hasn't, but it's performed much better. Much, much better than anticipated. And because of that, because the fact that the gamers love it, because the fact that the gamers have really gravitated towards this, love the environments, love the characters, love the story, love the gameplay, and they rejected Neil Cuckman's miserable, boring, dour, dreary, unfun, characterless, I would say, sequel to an amazing game, has just driven the media crazy. And all the American Asians going, oh my god, it's cultural appropriation. No, it's not. Shut up. Every little trick, every little signal, every little virtue, an attempt to try and tear it down. And what have gamers done at every single solitary turning? Flick the middle finger. Don't care. Game's great. Game's amazing. Even Japan love it. Absolutely adore it. Well, it's sold out, but like I said, but the game's absolutely phenomenal. It's been nice. It's been so nice to play Ghost of Tsushima, which I'm doing a playthrough for my Jedi Master members. If you want to hit the join button, just saying. Hidden behind a juicy paywall just for you. It's been a pleasure to play this game because it's actually given me hope again for gaming. Hope that there are teams out there like Sucker Punch that just want to create something fun for you. Fun and interesting and dynamic and immersive. And it's given me every single solitary bit of that. Every single solitary bit of that. So where The Last of Us Part 2 fails miserably with world building and character building, Ghost of Tsushima succeeds immensely. And all done in layers and layers and layers of fun. Something Cuckers himself said we don't do here at Naughty Dog. So anyway, we went on for a bit. Hope you enjoyed the vid. If you did, do get a thumbs up and also subscribe to the channel. Follow me on social media and YouTube for live streaming. Links are in the description box down below. I'll be back with some more stuff very soon. You take care. Bye for now.